Hello, I'm Jorge Getoso. Welcome to a new program. On today's show, police violence with our guest, activist Luci Murphy. Luci Murphy, a warm welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jorge.
Luci, we're going to be discussing police violence, but it's something that definitely you believe that is very unjust. When was the first time in your life that you were feeling that an injustice was really bothering you and you were taking action?
Well, probably the first time was when I was watching television, watching the dogs and the fire hoses being put on demonstrators who were demonstrating for their rights in this country.
So we're talking about the
civil rights movement, yes.
And before even you were mentioning that you were at school with a little girl.
When I was in the 5th grade, they let the boys go out for recess, to go out and play in the grass and with the trees, and the girls had to stay inside and do quiet things. So I put together a petition and got people to sign it to let the girls go out also, to have recreation outside.
Equal treatment.
Equal treatment, yes. And we submitted this petition to the teacher, and she considered it and decided that the girls could go out also.
So always injustice was really bothering you very deeply. What happened between that moment at school and when you were watching already the civil rights movement in, for example, Memphis?
Wow. Well, you know, when I got to the 7th grade, I had a teacher, an English teacher, who was secretary of the local CORE chapter, the Congress on Racial Equality. And she would recruit us, it was voluntary, she didn't force us to do anything, but she would recruit us to help her picket the stores downtown that were not hiring.
Downtown where?
Downtown in Washington, D.C., that were not hiring black people. And so we would be down there on Saturday mornings with our teacher. And then she had us to write letters to the editor of the Washington Post regarding the colonial status of Washington, D.C., because we pay taxes in Washington, D.C., but we do not have representation in our National Assembly, our Congress.
And then you continued to be in activism.
Yes, it's true.
And what was the highlight of your encounter with the police?
Actually, not my encounter, but my son was actually beaten by the police, falsely accused of stealing a moped, which he had bought with his own money that he earned by working as he was a young teenager. His father and I said that we weren't going to buy this for him. He had to earn the money and buy it himself. Well, he did that, and he was riding his moped, and the police stopped him and accused him of stealing what he was riding. And of course, he couldn't believe them, and he refused to go along with them, so they beat him up. And then we could not get a good judgment because the witnesses, the young people who saw it, were so afraid of the police that they would not come forward to testify.
So police violence and police brutality, if you want to call it,
yes,
is coming from a long way back?
Yes, and it's very common in the black community. The police are a social control mechanism. We
were watching recently a couple of incidents, quote-unquote incidents, that are really grave issues. One of them happened in New York with a bipolar African-American that was holding a
shower head.
A shower head.
A piece of plumbing.
Piece of plumbing that was looking for some people like a gun because he was pointing with that. And what happened?
He was shot and killed. And everyone in the neighborhood knew that he was a young man with problems, but the police that were called were not from the neighborhood, and they were not familiar with his problem. And it looks like anything that a black man has in his hand must be a gun. It may be a wallet, it may be a shower head, it may be it may be a telephone.
Yeah, a cellular phone.
A
yes.
cell phone. But to the police, it looks like a gun, and that's justification for shooting and killing people.
Cellular phone was what was holding in his hand Stephon Clark.
Yes.
Has been shot at least with eight bullets in his back, according to the autopsy that his family performed independently.
Exactly.
And Reverend Al Sharpton was at his funeral, and he was saying, and I quote his words, "It is time to stop this madness." Is it possible?
With it happening every 28 hours, we question if it's possible, but we have to stop it.
What could be doing the African American community to fight against that sort of situation?
Well, we have to have other mechanisms of controlling violence other than the police. We have to have more mental health intervention and more public health intervention. We have something in Washington, D.C. called the NEAR Act, which is an effort to use mental health professionals and other methods of identifying people who are prone to violence, and instead of arresting them, to buy the weapons from them and to assign them to counselors who will then either get them training, job training, or jobs if they have skills, to make sure that these people are incorporated in a good way into the society so that they can be helpful members of society and support their families.
Some statistics, and I read exactly the headline. Black men nearly 3 times more likely to die from police use of force. Yes. So this is a reality. This is a confirmation that we have seen very often, or as many as 28 hours every day. And there is the perception among the African American community that police regarding that community is not going there to take care of their security, but they're being almost like repressed.
They're not helpful. If you need help, the police are not the people to call, because it can bring disaster.
14 months with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. How is the life of the African American community under the presidency of Trump?
Well, we had police violence under Obama, but we think that the right wing is emboldened by Trump, and certainly the police, the racism in the police forces. Also, we have the issue of police being sent to Israel to be trained to treat the people that they deal with the way the Israelis, the Israeli Defense Force, deals with the Palestinians.
Which means?
Which means you don't view the people as someone you protect, but you view the people as your enemies, as terrorists.
And that is could we see the same pattern sometimes in incidents here with the police?
We see the same pattern sometimes here with the police, yes.
What about white supremacy?
That is what is functioning. It's interesting that some police forces were not constituted until the end of slavery. And basically the police were instituted to control black people.
To control rather than protect.
Rather than protect. And to arrest and put them back into slavery, to put them on chain gangs, because if they were imprisoned, then they could be forced to work for free.
You probably know Roland Roebuck. He's an activist here in Washington.
Yes.
And he has mentioned that he has at least the suspicion that many of the African Americans who are put in jail, they do work for very little money, for under, I don't know, the minimum
Pennies.
wage.
Pennies.
Definitely under the minimum wage.
Yes.
And the level of violence that is surrounded the African American community, quote unquote violence, in a way is exacerbated in order to put a lot of people in jail and make them work for very minimal wage.
Yes.
In the benefit of large corporations.
That is true.
It's true?
Yeah.
So that is happening.
And not only do they earn money for the corporations by working, but also the corporations are paid for private prisons. So as there's an incentive to keep these private prisons full of prisoners. And so you have police dealing with people in a very provocative way instead of behaving like public servants. The way they speak to people is very disrespectful, and it makes young people react in a way that is predictable.
And talking about private prisons, we have been addressing the issue regarding also, we're talking undocumented aliens, but it does happen with also African Americans. And since the last quarter of 2017, the Trump administration was ordering the building of 5 new private prisons for the amount of $2 billion. And the 2 large corporations that are running this business are making incredible profits with that. So detention centers, private detention prisons,
Yes.
has become a profitable business?
Yes. It's a money-making machine.
So you need prisoners to fill the beds.
That's right.
That there are about 33,000 beds a day that needs to be filled to keep the business running.
Yes.
And African Americans could be perfect targets for this business-like machine.
As well as undocumented immigrants. Yes.
Is that justice?
Not at all.
How the American people, because imagine, let's, for the sake of this conversation, that the 1% control the 99%, okay? Like it did happen, to remember, with Wall Street, with that moment of the 99%. Why the people do not react to those type of injustices?
People are very stressed. They're working too many hours, and then when they get off work, they want to relax. And the way they choose to relax is to watch television. And so the television is controlled by corporate interests, which is programming fear and anxiety.
And violence.
And violence all the time. And it's a vicious cycle. There's a saying that the greatest tool in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And they have really taken the mind of the oppressed and captivated it with television and the commercial media.
Jimmy Carter has said, and I read his quote, "The U.S. is an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery." Is it?
It seems, sadly, it seems that there's a lot of money to buy television time and twist people's minds.
And congressmen, buying congressmen
Oh,
too?
buying, yes, Congress and senators.
So politicians are being bought by huge corporations? So they're not really governing for the
people who elected them, no. And of course, less and less people elect them.
Do you think that with all the issues that we have seen in this year, we have seen this police violence, we have seen the persecution of undocumented immigrants and talking about refugees and so on and so forth, these issues are going to have an impact in the midterms elections in November, you think?
I hope so. I hope that people are waking up, particularly as people see children have been deprived of their parents. I mean, parents are being deported. How are the children, the minor children, supposed to pay the rent, supposed to pay the mortgage? I mean, this is just putting people on the street, people, defenseless people.
What's going on with the immigration issue? Because Donald Trump, it seems that has been focusing in painting immigration in general, or immigrants.
Immigrants as criminals.
As criminals in general. It's not only that we're talking about undocumented. Everything that is foreign.
That's right.
Is being painted like negative, like a threat to the country?
That's right.
And with what purpose?
Filling prisons and detention centers.
It's quite worrisome for you?
It is very worrisome, which is why we are reactivating or activating the Poor People's Campaign for the children of the immigrants who have lost their parents, for the families, the black families who've lost their sons and daughters to police violence, so many people who've lost their houses through this manipulation by the banks, and people who've lost their jobs because of the exporting of industries.
What about the Black Lives Matter movement? What is going on with it?
Well, Black Lives Matter is busy organizing, assisting the families to bring suit against the police departments, against the city governments that have allowed this to happen, to raise the profile of this whole issue, because we still have too many white citizens in the United States who don't think this is really happening, who think that somebody's lying to
Because
them.
of the media?
Because of the media.
What about the students that were surviving the shooting on the school in Florida? They create the Never Again movement.
Yes.
Do you think that is going to, what is the future, you
That
think?
has definitely awakened a lot of people, yes.
Because basically the kids are saying we are doing the jobs of the adults, that they are not doing it. So the gun issue...
And these are white middle-class students who are still over the radar, who still can get press, can get attention, media attention, and they're getting it.
Do you think that is something going to happen regarding the gun control? They're going to put more regulations, at least, for example, 21 years of age to buy a semi-automatic weapon, or more strict regulations, or nothing is going to happen?
Something has to happen. And if it doesn't, I think these young people are going to stop traffic, which is going to make something happen.
We've seen in the few past days that the country was celebrating the 50th anniversary of the assassination. Of Martin Luther King. What was your reaction that day?
I was encouraged that there are so many young people standing up, black and white young people standing up against gun violence.
What do you remember of that day? Because you remember that you were here. You were in Washington always.
I was in my last year of high school when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember because he was a man of peace. He was completely nonviolent, and so people were just outraged when someone who was so peaceful was assassinated. And I remember the rage that people just broke windows and set the town on fire because this was the man who held out the olive branch, and he was being gunned down.
We have seen in that precisely commemoration of his assassination some African-American leaders talking, and the African-American community is united. They have one leader that represents all, or what is the situation?
Oh, currently?
Yes.
No, we don't have one leader that represents all. But we do have more and more young people who understand that they don't have a future if things continue the way they are. Because we have even the young people who are able to finish college can't find jobs, and the ones who can find jobs can't buy houses because everything is so out of reach.
What is going to be the former President Barack Obama regarding the African American community?
Oh, that's a really good question. Barack Obama did not help the African American community in the ways that we hoped he would when he was in. It's going to be interesting to see what he does now that he is not under the gun, shall we say, as president. But I really I look to the younger generation for real leadership, because Barack Obama is still part of the system.
Well, so much so that for the people who are very skeptical and very, very, very tough, say Barack Obama is like an Oreo cookie, outside black and inside is white. Is that too tough?
No, it's not too tough. This country is making money off of war and is promoting war all the time, and Barack Obama did not stop the war. And
he started 5 wars during his 8 years in power, and he was getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
It's embarrassing.
So something was not really...
No. They were hoping that he would be more peaceful. I think they gave him a prize hoping that he would be more peaceful. But this system is a system that promotes war.
What is your opinion of Donald Trump?
Oh, I don't have words. He's such an embarrassment. He's such, well, he's a puppet.
Puppet of whom?
A puppet of the system. And he's provoking conflict where it's amazing. I mean, he's trade conflict, supporting white supremacy. He's promoting chaos.
And you've been in the past few days also demonstrating against Israel in front of the Israel embassy here in Washington. Tell us about that.
The tragedy of Gaza is something that has gone on far too long. The people don't have water, they don't have electricity, they don't have medicine, they don't have food, and the Israelis are shooting them point blank, unarmed civilians who are demonstrating for their human rights.
You were also mentioning that you are very much upset about the actions of the United States against Venezuela.
Yes, because the government of the United States is promoting violence in Venezuela by funding the so-called civil society groups that are supposedly promoting democracy, but they're promoting violence.
And do it with what purpose?
Possibly to make it look like the government of Venezuela is in chaos and the United States needs to come in and save the day with an invasion.
And in reality is with what purpose?
To control oil, to control the productive capacity of the country.
So once more the issue is money.
The issue is money.
Like in Israel and other Middle East countries, for example?
Yes.
Worrisome?
Very, because of the cost in lives and the destruction of whole countries.
Luci Murphy, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.